Hello, friends. We are interested in the geography of our views, so please like and write in the comments from which city are you watching us, and were there loud stories of betrayal in your city? Share your stories with us. Maybe the next betrayal story will be from your city. And we start. The small house with a white picket fence on a quiet suburban street looked like the personification of tranquility. 3 people lived in this house: David, his wife Emily, and their young son Luke. A warm ray of morning sun peeked through the kitchen window, where David was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee. Birds were singing outside the window, neighbors were walking their dogs, a typical serene morning in the suburbs of a small American city. Emily stood at the stove, stirring Luke's oatmeal. She smiled at her husband over her shoulder. She was wearing a light blue robe, and her hair was pulled back into a loose bun. David admired her homely beauty, slightly disheveled chestnut curls, delicate profile. The morning minutes were for him an outlet before the start of the working day. "Dad, will Uncle come today?" Luke asked unexpectedly. The boy sat in his high chair and dangled his legs. He was only 4 years old, a lively and inquisitive child with Emily's serious green eyes and a sly smile inherited from his father. Now he looked at his parents, waiting for an answer to his strange question. "What kind of uncle, son?" David looked up from his thoughts, raising his eyebrows in surprise. He looked at Luke and then at Emily. The wife also turned to look at her son. A slight shadow of confusion crossed her face. "The uncle who comes when Dad is at work," Luke said with complete seriousness, as if we were talking about the most ordinary thing. "So tall, Uncle." There was silence in the kitchen. The spoon froze in Emily's hand. David felt a slight uneasiness rise within him. What kind of guy? None of my friends seemed to promise to come, and there was certainly no uncle who regularly visited their home during the day. Emily laughed quietly, a little forcedly, and turned back to the stove. "Luke, honey, no one is going to come. You're probably confused with Mr. Rogers, remember, when the postman came by last week. He brought a package, so you decided that some uncle had come." She spoke in an even tone, but David detected an unnatural note in her voice. He knew his wife well after 6 years of marriage. This was the tone she used when she was trying to hide awkwardness or anxiety. Luke shook his head, furrowing his brow, clearly disagreeing. "No, not the postman. He was in a blue uniform, and this guy was without a uniform. He came the day before yesterday." Now Emily turned around sharply. Something similar to panic flashed on her face, but she quickly pulled herself together. "The day before yesterday?" David asked, tensed internally. The day before yesterday was a weekday, Wednesday. In the morning, he left for work as usual around 8 and returned at 6 in the evening. Emily had to be at kindergarten until noon and then pick up Luke, who was attending the same group. They returned home around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Who could come? A question flashed through my head. Isn't he a technician from an internet company? But there seemed to be no requests for service. "Luke, have you seen this guy?" David asked softly, trying to speak calmly, although his heart was beating a little faster. The boy nodded seriously. "Saw. I was playing with cars in the living room, and he came in. Mom told me to sit quietly in the room, but I peeked a little," the son admitted with the naive pride of a conspirator. David glanced sharply at his wife. She stood too still, with her back to them. She didn't seem to be breathing. "And what did this uncle do?" David's voice sounded choked even for himself. "My throat is dry." Luke shrugged. "I don't know. They were talking with Mom on the sofa. Then my mother sent me to play in the room, and I didn't see. But this was not the first time he came." The last phrase sounded like baby babble, but resonated in David's head like a loud alarm bell. "Not the first time." The child is probably confused, trying to attract attention, but a strange shiver has already run along the spine. Emily finally turned to them, holding a pot of oatmeal. The smile on her face seemed overly wide and tense. "Our Luke makes up stories, doesn't he, baby? Here is a dreamer growing up." She walked up to the table and reached out to pat her son's hair, but her hand trembled barely noticeably. "There is no uncle, honey." David looked at his wife carefully. It bothered him how hard she tried to hide her confusion. An embarrassed smile, quick words to change the subject. He's seen it all before. This is how she behaved when she hid some little thing like a spoiled birthday cake or extra money spent on a new dress. But what could be so serious that she is so nervous? Luke was probably dreaming, or his imagination was running wild, he said out loud, trying to make his voice sound ordinary. At the same time, he sought to meet Emily's gaze. Really, son? Luke frowned, clearly not understanding why they didn't believe him. But I saw him. That's enough, my friend, Emily interrupted softly but firmly, putting the porridge into the child's bowl. Eat the porridge, otherwise it will get cold. She sat the bowl down in front of her son, kissed the top of his head, and turned to put the pan back on the stove. David took a sip of his cooling coffee, trying to calm his strange anxiety. He decided not to continue asking questions in front of the child. Perhaps there really was some simple explanation. Maybe the father of one of the students came for advice. Emily just recently told me that one mother from her group asked her for advice on child behavior. What if it was the father of one of the children? After all, Emily is a teacher, and her parents often communicate with her. But why didn't she mention it then? Usually, if someone came in, she would talk about it in the evening. And it's strange that this guest came home during the day and didn't meet him somewhere at a school or cafe. There were too many questions swarming in my head, but now was not the time to ask them. He noticed Emily's hands were still shaking a little as she turned to the sink to rinse the pot. To diffuse the situation, David tried to smile and announced in a cheerful voice, "Well, my beloved, it's time for me to get ready for work." He stood up from the table, glancing at the wall clock. Almost 7:45, just time to leave so as not to get stuck in traffic. Walking up to Luke, David patted him on the back. "Eat up, champ, or you'll end up as skinny as Spider-Man after a hard night," he joked. The boy snorted and started eating his porridge. Emily dried her hands with a towel and walked to the door, seeing her husband out. She still looked a little tense. David took the jacket that was slung over the back of the chair and put it on. Then he turned to his wife. He wanted to ask about Uncle directly, but something held him back. Maybe he was afraid to hear something he didn't want to know. Instead, he put his arm around her waist and kissed her on the cheek. "See you in the evening. Love you." Emily smiled more naturally and kissed the corner of his lips. "And I you. Have a nice day at work, honey." David smiled back, but he didn't feel the smile inside. Luke's little voice still sounded in my head. The uncle who comes when Dad is at work. This is not the first time. He unclenched his arms and took the car keys from the counter. Walking out onto the porch, he looked over his shoulder. Emily was standing in the doorway, leaning on the doorframe, waving at him, her usual gentle expression on her face. Luke peeked out from behind her leg and happily waved both hands. "Bye, Daddy." "Bye, son," David answered. Closing the car door behind him, he started the engine and slowly pulled out of the yard. Their house flashed in the rearview mirror, still as peaceful in appearance. But David's soul was scratching. He couldn't get his son's words and his wife's strange reaction out of his head. The sick worm of jealousy or anxiety is already stirring somewhere inside. Who is this uncle, he thought, joining the flow of cars? Maybe a neighbor really came by, or one of his wife's colleagues. If so, why didn't you say it right away? David took a deep breath, trying to calm down. After all, he had no reason not to trust Emily. During the 6 years of their relationship, she never gave any reason to doubt her fidelity or honesty. She was a loving wife, a caring mother. Their marriage seemed strong and happy, not ideal, of course. There were the usual minor quarrels, but nothing serious. He shook his head, as if shooing away an annoying fly. "Stop it," he said to himself. Luke must have mixed up something. Children at this age can mix reality and fiction. Vaughn sometimes says that he saw a monster under the bed, so there is no need to focus your attention. However, no matter how hard David tried to switch to the radio or to thoughts about the upcoming meeting in the office, the image of some stranger in their house did not let go. The detail that particularly bothered me was, not the first time. Does this mean that this person came more than once? Thoughts jumped from one to another. What if this is the father of that boy, what's his name, Brian? Emily told me that he has behavior problems, and she was consulting with the parents. Maybe they decided to meet at home, when I'm at work, to calmly discuss outside the setting of the kindergarten. Yes, that's possible. David clung to this version as an anchor of salvation. It sounded innocent. Help the child. Emily has always been responsive, and perhaps she didn't want to bother him with stories so that he wouldn't worry unnecessarily. Moreover, why does he need to know about any parental consultations? But why then such a reaction? Why did Luke say, not the first time? How many consultations could there be? And why send your son to the room if it's just about talking about the child? Except that the topic was touchy, but still strange. Cars crawled along the highway. David drove the car almost automatically, cutting off at the exit to the junction. Two feelings fought inside him, trust in his wife and nascent suspicion. He was angry with himself for these thoughts. It's Emily, his Emily, faithful and kind. Is he really capable of thinking badly of her? In an attempt to dispel his misgivings, he decided to call his wife later in the afternoon, just to see how things were going. At the same time, perhaps, he will carefully find out about that uncle. Even if he feels ridiculous, it's better to dispel doubts. Having made his decision, David felt some relief. He turned the radio up louder and tried to focus on the road and the pleasant melody playing from the speakers. The morning sun gilded the tops of the trees along the route. Life went on as usual. Most likely, everything really was in order. But deep inside, a tiny seed of doubt was born. And although David tried to ignore it, this seed took root in his soul, preparing to sprout into something dark and disturbing. David couldn't completely distract himself from the morning conversation the entire way to work. When he reached the office parking lot, he lingered in the car for a few minutes, trying to collect his thoughts. He worked as a project manager in a small IT company, and usually in the morning his head was filled with upcoming meetings and letters. But today, before my mind's eye stood the face of Luke, seriously talking about some stranger in the house. Stop thinking about it, he told himself as he got out of the car. The sun had already risen higher, promising a hot day. The asphalt area in front of the office began to heat up. The air trembled over the hoods of the cars. David walked through the glass doors and nodded to the guard. Contrary to his expectations, the familiar environment of the office did not bring relief. The first step was to go to the planning meeting. Colleagues have already gathered in the conference room. His friend Nick, a tall, blonde guy from the marketing department, waved at him. "Hey, Dave, why are you so gloomy this morning?" David tried to fake a smile. "Yes, I didn't get enough sleep," he excused himself, sitting down on a chair next to Nick. The chief began the meeting by discussing current projects. David scribbled mechanical notes on his notebook, trying to look engaged, but my thoughts kept drifting away. He felt as if he was missing something obvious, some details of the last days. Was there anything strange in Emily's behavior before this? He remembered how last week he came home, and she was talking on the phone in a low voice and hastily ended the conversation as soon as she heard his footsteps. Then he didn't attach any importance. You never know, she was talking with a friend or at work. But now this episode has come to mind. She said then that a colleague from the kindergarten called about teaching materials. Another case, the day before yesterday, on the very Wednesday when, according to Luke, Uncle came. David recalled that he returned in the evening to find Emily agitated. She didn't hear him enter and was startled when he entered the kitchen. On the table there was an unclosed bottle of red wine and two glasses, although the second one was empty. Then he wondered why she opened the wine in the middle of the day. Emily was embarrassed and said that this wine was given to her by one of the mothers of the pupils, so she decided to try a sip after work while Luke was playing. She poured one glass for herself and simply took out the second clean glass by accident. The answer seemed strange to him. Emily hardly drank alone, but he attributed her embarrassment to the fact that she had drunk a glass of wine during the day and did not want to look like a slacker or a drinker in front of him. Now, connecting the dots, David felt an unpleasant chill. 2 glasses. Did anyone come to visit? It turns out she wasn't pouring the wine for herself. He also remembered, when he then came up to hug her, she smelled of someone else's cologne. It was barely perceptible, but David noticed, since the aroma was unfamiliar, clearly not her perfume or his own lotion. Emily quickly pulled away with the excuse of checking dinner in the oven. David's heart was beating faster now. Then he did not attach any importance, chalking it up to the fact that the smell could have remained from someone in kindergarten or from a gifted bottle of perfume. But now, too many strange little things, previously thrown out of my head, lined up in an alarming chain. Dave, Nick whispered, nudging him with his elbow. David came to his senses. The leader was looking straight at him, clearly expecting an answer to a question he had not heard. Sorry, I was lost in thought. Can you repeat it? He muttered, feeling a hot blush cover his face. The boss frowned with displeasure, but repeated, asking about the status of one of the projects. David apologized, quickly got ready, and reported everything on the matter. After that, he forced himself to concentrate on the discussion, pushing away personal thoughts. The work required attention, otherwise problems at home would seem like flowers compared to a reprimand or dismissal. By midday, he had managed to get a little immersed in his work. But as soon as the clock hands approached 12, he returned to his plan to call Emily. He usually did not call during the day unless necessary. We corresponded only occasionally. Therefore, when he picked up the phone, he himself felt awkward. What if it really was all nothing, and he was acting like a jealous fool? The phone buzzed with beeps. A few seconds later, the wife's voice was heard. "Hello, dear," Emily answered cheerfully, even cheerfully. Some children's voices and noise could be heard in the background. It looked like she was on the playground. The children were walking in the kindergarten before lunch. "Hello, how is your day? Am I distracting?" David asked, trying to keep his tone natural. "No, everything is fine. We're just on a walk. The kids are frolicking," she answered. In the distance, a child's laughter and her gentle call were heard. "Be careful, don't push." Then Emily turned to her husband again. "What happened? Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything is fine," he said hastily. "I just decided to hear your voice." "So nice," she smiled into the phone. "Are you okay at work?" "Yeah, I just missed you a little," he lied reluctantly. Should I ask about Uncle right now? But not over the phone. He suddenly felt ashamed of his suspicions. Here she is, his Emily, at work, looking after the kids, responsible and sweet as always. Why would she even get involved in any secret meetings? He hesitated, not knowing what else to say, and said the first thing that came to mind. "Listen, no one came to see us on Wednesday." "Well, maybe a courier or someone else." Short pause. For a second, only the din of children could be heard over the speaker. Then the wife's even voice. "On Wednesday? No, I don't remember that." "And what?" "Yes, so. Luke said something about Uncle this morning, so I thought maybe someone came in," David said as nonchalantly as possible, trying not to show tension. There was a slight laugh in response. "Oh, Luke sometimes imagines this. Do you remember how a month ago he claimed that he saw a fairy in the garden? Children fantasize. Nobody came to us, of course. Unless the postman brought an advertisement, but I didn't even open it." She spoke convincingly, calmly. "You know, I was busy. I picked up Luke after work, came home, then ran around the store in the late afternoon." David's grip on the phone tightened. According to her, it turned out that the whole day went as usual. Not a word about wine, not a hint about the guest. Is she lying? Or just doesn't care? "I see. Well, okay, just checking. Thank you for calming the paranoid," he tried to joke, although the laugh came out strained. "Silly," she answered affectionately. "Don't worry so much. Everything is fine. Okay, kiss me, see you in the evening." He finished the conversation. Returning the phone to the base, David sat for a while, staring at the screen of the switched-off phone. My heart began to beat alarmingly again. Emily explained everything calmly and logically. But that's the point, it's too calm. And for some reason, her words did not dispel, but rather strengthened his suspicions. If everything was as she said, why did he almost physically feel the insincerity? Maybe because he screwed it up himself? Or because they are actually hiding something from him? He tried to get back to work, but by midday he realized he had zero productivity. The image of 2 glasses on the table and the smell of someone else's cologne were spinning in my head. He wanted more and more to immediately go home and check everything with his own eyes. But where to go? The house is empty, Emily is at work, Luke is with her. You need to calm down and not do anything stupid, he told himself. A couple more hours and the working day will be over. It will be visible there. In the evening, David arrived home tired and irritated. The traffic jams were exhausting, and the internal tension only intensified. As soon as he entered, Luke threw himself on his neck. "Daddy, you're back." David picked up his son, trying to smile. "What could we do without it, hero? How was your day?" "I drew you, Mom, and myself," the boy announced proudly. "There, it's hanging on the refrigerator." David headed to the kitchen, not letting go of Luke. There was indeed a fresh children's drawing on the refrigerator, 3 figures holding hands against the backdrop of a house and a large yellow sun. Family. My heart sank painfully, just like in reality, for now. "What a beauty! A real artist is growing up," he praised, patting his son on the head. He smiled contentedly and asked to put it on the floor. Emily left the bedroom at that moment. She had already changed clothes after work. She was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Seeing her husband, she smiled warmly. "Hello, dear. How are you tired?" She came over to hug him. David, struggling with internal tension, pulled his wife towards him, trying to catch familiar smells. This time only her shampoo with the scent of jasmine and vanilla. No extraneous colognes. "It can be worse," he responded, looking into her eyes. "How is your day? Weren't the kids very naughty?" Emily rolled her eyes with a smile. "As usual. Tommy got into a fight with Kevin again over a toy. Molly cried when her mom left. You know, a typical kindergarten teacher's day." She spoke relaxedly and seemed genuinely happy to see him. David involuntarily began to calm down. Maybe it really is all in his head. They went to dinner together. Emily had prepared lasagna earlier in the day and now warmed it up in the oven. The family sat around the table, chatting about little things. Luke talking about what song they were taught to sing, Emily chiming in, laughing at the kids' funny mistakes. David chimed in, trying to get involved in the conversation. At first glance, everything was perfectly normal. But as soon as the conversation died down, David's gaze involuntarily began to feel the details. The corner of the sofa in the living room, where, according to Luke, his mother and uncle were sitting. A bedroom door behind which stood emptiness or hid a secret. After dinner, he volunteered to give Luke a bath and put him to bed. While Emily washed the dishes, David ran a bath and played pirates with his son, driving away dark thoughts. Children's laughter somewhat dispelled the gloomy mood. At such moments, looking at the baby, he thought that he was ready to endure everything for the sake of his happiness. Even if, no, not there again. When Luke was already lying in bed, surrounded by a teddy bear and a plastic dinosaur, David sat down next to him, waiting for his son to fall asleep. The boy blinked, fighting against drowsiness, but had not yet completely given in to sleep. "Dad," he whispered suddenly, looking at the ceiling. "Did you remember to ask Mom about your uncle?" David tensed. So this is what his baby is thinking about. He patted his son on the head. "I asked. Mom said that there was no uncle. You probably imagined it." Luke wrinkled his nose. "But I saw. Maybe you were dreaming and thought it was real," David said softly. "You love to fantasize, my inventor." The boy frowned and seemed about to object, but then he simply sighed. "Maybe." His eyes closed. A minute later, even breathing announced that the son had fallen asleep. David carefully made his way out of the room, closing the door behind him. A feeling of guilt burned in his chest. So it turns out that he is actually teaching his son not to trust his eyes. But what to do? How could he support Luke's words if Emily denies everything? The floor lamp was burning in the living room. Emily was sitting on the sofa with a book. Seeing her husband, she put aside her reading. Has our robber fallen asleep? Yeah, I'm exhausted today, David responded, dropping down next to her. They sat in silence for some time. Emily pressed herself against his shoulder. You're kind of tense today, she said quietly, running her hand over his arm. Are you sure everything is all right? David felt a familiar pang of suspicion. Was she also embarrassed by her secrets? Or does the truth see his anxiety? He shrugged, trying to smile. Yes, there's just a lot of work to do. And I'm sorry if I took this nonsense with Uncle too seriously this morning. Children make up. Emily reacted instantly. She raised her head and looked into his eyes, then gently touched his cheek with her palm. Everything is fine. I understand that you were just scared. What if someone was a stranger? But I would have told you if someone had come. You know me. She spoke kindly, but David sensed the hidden pleading in her voice. It's like she really wants him to believe it. I know, he answered quietly and kissed his wife, trying to drive away the last vestiges of doubt. Emily kissed back gently, but a little more insistently than usual. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pressing her whole body against him. Her breathing quickened, her lips trembled. David was surprised by this fervor. It had been a long time since they had kissed so hotly outside the bedroom. Perhaps she, too, was alarmed by the morning conversation and was now trying to prove that everything was fine between them. They loved each other right there on the couch, quickly and passionately. This act seemed to be a mixture of fear, guilt, passion, and a mutual desire to make sure that they still needed each other. Then, clinging to her husband's chest, Emily whispered, "Promise that you will never doubt my love." David ran his hand through her sweat-damp hair, her heart still pounding from the intimacy. This request sounded so sincere and at the same time alarming that he felt uneasy again. He hugged his wife tighter. I promise, he said, looking in the semi-darkness at the ceiling behind her. Emily relaxed and soon fell asleep on his shoulder. David lay without closing his eyes. The trembling whisper of his wife stood in his ears. Promise that you will never doubt. Why suddenly such fear? What was she afraid of? That he would find out the truth, or that he would lose trust in her for no reason? He didn't know the answer. But I firmly decided for myself, I need to find out the truth, whatever it may be. Otherwise, these doubts will corrode him from the inside. It was a hard night. Emily fell asleep quickly, lulled by the closeness and emotional exhaustion of the day. David still lay with his eyes open, listening to her quiet breathing. The clock showed past midnight when he carefully climbed out from under her hand. Emily muttered something, but did not wake up, curled up on the sofa, covered with a blanket. David sat down with his feet on the floor. His heart beat unevenly, as if he was about to embark on an important task or a dangerous adventure. Although what is dangerous is simply checking your own wife's phone. But this thought sent a chill down my spine. It means that it has finally come to the point where he is ready to rummage through her personal things. On the coffee table, among scattered children's books and TV remotes, lay Emily's phone. She forgot it there after dinner or left it on purpose, carried away by reading and subsequent events. The black screen showed nothing. David hesitated. He was afraid both that he would find confirmation of his fears and that he would not find anything and would feel like the last scoundrel who suspected an angel in the dirt. But the memory of the quiet fear in her eyes in the morning, the strange conversation, the second glass of wine, everything tipped the scales towards what was worth looking for. He carefully took the phone. The screen immediately flashed, demanding an unlock code, a 6-digit code. David knew that Emily had a password and knew an approximate set of numbers, birthdays, simple combinations. They repeatedly discussed what needed to be changed to a more complex one. But it seems she never changed. The first time he tried, he entered their wedding date incorrectly. My heart skipped a beat. There would be too many incorrect attempts, and the phone would be blocked. The second time I tried Luke's birthday, it didn't work either. Damn, he cursed to himself. Emily seems to have changed her password after all. Or Maybe her password is the date of her father's death. She sometimes chose this sad date for important codes. Should I try it? He entered the combination, the screen went dark, and then unlocked, revealing the desktop. Got it. David felt a surge of conflicting emotions, relief at being able to enter, fear at what might now be revealed. He quickly turned off the sound so as not to accidentally give himself away by any signal, and began to scroll through the contents. First messages. From whom can they be? The list of chats contained mainly the names of mothers and colleagues. Sylvia work, Jenny kindergarten, Monica group, etc. Nothing suspicious at first glance. But suddenly his attention was drawn to a contact with only a smiley face instead of a name. Blue heart. Very strange. David opened the correspondence. There weren't many messages, it seemed like they were deleted periodically. But what he managed to read turned the blood in his veins to ice. Yesterday, 17:20 from the heart. Is everything okay? You didn't suspect anything. Answer from Emily. There was a conversation, but everything seemed fine. It's settled. From a stranger. Thank God. I was already worried. I really don't want any problems. Emily. It's okay. You just need to be careful. Stranger. Yes, I'm going crazy without you. When can we meet? Emily. We have to wait a little, honey. Next week, as usual. Stranger. How long? I can't stand it. Emily. It's hard for me too. I'll write later, I love you. David reread this short dialogue several times, feeling nausea creeping into his throat. There was no doubt. His wife was cheating on him. She called someone sweetheart, sent hearts, and was clearly discussing this morning's episode. You didn't suspect anything? That means they knew that Luke had let it slip, and they were afraid that he, David, understood something. She reassured him, lied about, everything is fine, it's worked out, probably referring to both the morning conversation and the evening attempt to regain trust through intimacy. My hands began to tremble. I wanted to swing and throw the phone against the wall or wake her up right now, poking her nose at these messages, demanding an explanation. Adrenaline hit my temples. A traitor. A loved one from whom he did not expect this. David forced himself not to make any noise. He took a deep breath and exhaled, looking at Emily sleeping peacefully. Next week as usual, she wrote. This means that these meetings continued for a long time, according to schedule, and most likely it was meant that they meet once a week, apparently on one of the days when this is possible during the day. Possibly Wednesday, based on Luke's words. Maybe on other days. He remembered those 2 glasses on Wednesday, everything came together. Wednesday is their day. Having calmed down a little, David continued to examine the phone. There are no old messages left. Apparently, she deletes them regularly. There is nothing special in the gallery, ordinary photos of a child, children from kindergarten, themselves and their family. Not a single compromising shot. Calls several incoming and outgoing calls to an unknown number marked work. Perhaps she kept her lover under the guise of a work contract. The number was the same. David quickly found a piece of paper and a pen lying on the table and wrote down the phone number. Let's denote it as X. Who does it belong to? Looking at his sleeping wife, he felt both love and hatred for her. His heart sank with pain. This was Emily, the mother of his child, the one with whom he planned to grow old. How could she? For what? Thousands of questions swarmed in his head, but he didn't ask them now. Now the main thing is not to give away that he knew everything. She thinks that everything is settled, and that he doesn't suspect anything. He needs to maintain this illusion in order to catch them red-handed. Otherwise, there is a risk that she will undo everything, destroy the evidence, convince him that he was imagining things, and make him look paranoid. No, he wanted to see everything with his own eyes, otherwise part of him, no matter what, would cling to hope, in case there was a mistake. David carefully returned the phone to its place and quietly went into the kitchen. There he turned on the night light over the sink and, squeezing the handle, looked at the piece of paper with the number. Had he noticed this number before? Probably not. 206-555-0147. Not familiar. Probably the lover is the same father from kindergarten as he already guessed. While emotions were still fresh, David decided to act quickly. He took out his cell phone and entered the saved number into the Facebook search. Sometimes people link the number to the page, maybe they can figure it out. The search thought for a few seconds, then returned the result. Profile not found. Then he tried to simply Google the number. There were also 0 results. Only directory sites offered to find out the owner for a fee. Clearly, we'll have to find out differently. He thought about it. Emily wrote, as usual, and next week. This means they probably have regular meetings, perhaps once a week, maybe every Wednesday or Thursday. If the last one was on Wednesday, then the next one probably will too. Perhaps Wednesday is convenient because she has half the day free in the afternoon, and her lover also has a window. This gave us a few days head start. Today is already Thursday night. There's still almost a week until Wednesday. Will they be able to avoid dating for so long? In the message, the lover complained that he couldn't stand it and asked when they could meet. She wrote, "We'll have to wait a little next week." Maybe they delayed for safety reasons, so David has a chance to prepare. The thought of a hidden camera came to mind. He, as a person who understands technology, could install something at home so as not to sit in ambush. But on the other hand, it is unknown where exactly they prefer. In any case, the best proof is to catch it in person and write it down. The video from his phone is like an additional trump card so that there is nothing to deny. David turned off the bedside lamp and walked back into the living room in the darkness. Emily did not move, still snoring peacefully. He carefully lay down next to her, trying not to touch. It suddenly became unpleasant for him to feel her skin, even though a minute ago he had still hugged her with tenderness. Now it seemed that there was a wall between them, an abyss of lies. The rest of the night passed without sleep. David lay there and wondered what to do. First of all, you need to come up with a reason not to be at work at the moment when their meeting is planned, but so that Emily does not become wary. Maybe take a day off or say he's going on a business trip and suddenly come back. Yes, the idea, to pretend that he is leaving for the whole day or even 2, for example, supposedly for a conference in another city. Then she will probably relax and invite her lover, thinking that her husband is far away. By morning, David had a rough plan. True, every time, imagining the future scene of exposure, he shook with rage and pain. But he understood he had to control himself for the sake of Luke, and in order to carry out everything in cold blood. When the dawn lay like a gray stripe on the curtains, Emily began to stir. Opening her eyes, she saw her husband awake. "Why aren't you sleeping?" she muttered sleepily, pulling herself closer. David put a tired smile on his face. "I woke up early, some work thoughts were creeping in, and I couldn't sleep anymore." Emily sighed sympathetically and ran her hand over his cheek. "Poor. Maybe you could try taking a nap for another hour. It's only 6 in the morning." "No, I think I'll go early," he answered, sitting down. It was disgusting to my soul because of her concern, knowing what lie was hidden behind it. "There's a rush at work. I'd better start earlier." He stood up, trying not to look at his wife. She didn't seem to suspect anything and just nodded. "Okay, then I'll make breakfast quickly." "No need," he said faster than planned, and then softened his tone. "I'll catch something on the way, don't worry." "Well, as you wish," Emily responded, also getting up and wrapping her robe over her t-shirt. "I was going to bake pancakes." "Really, it's not worth it," David repeated, already heading to the bathroom. "I have to go." He couldn't wait to get out of the house, because staying close to her, feigning ignorance, was now beyond his strength. He felt that he was barely restraining himself from screaming. Having quickly showered and dressed, he went into the bedroom to kiss the still sleeping Luke on the cheek. The boy snored and rolled over, continuing to see childhood dreams. The father's heart sank. For his sake, he must act carefully. As he passed the kitchen, he saw Emily kneading pancake batter, despite his refusal to eat breakfast. He paused for a moment, watching. Such a picture at home, the wife is busy at the stove, the family, and she, maybe, has her thoughts somewhere else. Emily noticed his gaze and smiled. I decided to do it anyway. Maybe you'll have time to eat a couple, or I'll take it with me. Thank you, he answered quietly, turning away. There was a lump in my throat. He was afraid that if he stayed even a minute longer, he would give himself away. So, citing a rush, I put on my shoes and slipped out the door without even drinking my coffee. On the porch, he took a deep breath of the cool morning air. A trembling ran through my body, either from lack of sleep or from nerves. But now, outside the walls of the house, where the smell of her perfume was in the air, it became a little easier for him to breathe. David got to work earlier than usual and, sitting in the car in the still empty parking lot, finally allowed himself to throw out some of his emotions. He slammed his fist on the steering wheel several times, causing the horn to blare loudly. Then he grabbed his head. He wanted to scream or cry, but there were no tears, only anger and pain bursting through his chest. Arriving at the office, he realized that there would be no use today. A night without sleep and a state of shock made him completely incapacitated. Nick, meeting him at the coffee machine, immediately noticed his condition. Buddy, you look terrible. What's happened? David waved him off, but Nick didn't leave behind. This friend knew him for many years, they studied together, and then got a job in the same company. David usually shared his problems with him, but how to tell something like this? Shame, anger, and pain mixed into a monstrous mess. However, Nick sat down next to him on the sofa in the recreation area and said quietly, "Listen, Dave, you're like a brother to me. I see something serious. Family, parents, you're not like that over trifles." David's lips almost trembled at his friend's attention. He squeezed the coffee cup until his knuckles turned white. "Looks like it's serious. I really feel bad, Nick, but I'm not ready to talk yet." Nick nodded, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Okay, I won't press you. Just know I'm nearby. If you need to talk it out or help, call me." David felt grateful. He squeezed Nick's shoulder in a friendly manner, but didn't answer. The rest of the day, he somehow sat at the computer, pretending to work. About 5 times, I caught myself staring at the screen without even reading the letters. Scenes were playing out in his head. Here he comes home in the middle of the day. Now he opens the bedroom door. He already knew approximately what he would see there, but it seemed that he masochistically continued to imagine these pictures. They made me feel nauseous and wanted to smash everything around me. At some point, he caught his reflection in the monitor. His eyes were red, his gaze was absent, his jaw clenched. "You can't do this. It will attract the attention of your superiors." David forced himself to perform at least the most routine task to distract himself. During the day, I received a couple of messages from Emily on my phone. She sent a photo of a smiling Luke, whom she took to kindergarten. "Your little pirate blows a kiss to Daddy," and later, "How are you doing, honey? Don't overwork yourself." David looked at these messages for a long time, unable to answer anything. Ordinary loving words that now seemed like mockery. With what ease she writes, "Darling," draws hearts, as if nothing happened. She's probably sitting among the kids right now, laughing as if nothing had happened, and she's planning when to tumble with her lover again. Remembering his nightly discoveries, David felt a painful pang of jealousy. What kind of actor do you have to be to play a double game so skillfully? Or is this not a game for her, but a simple solution? Both family and a lover on the side for the thrill. He tried not to slip into corrosive thoughts about what they were doing behind his back, but his imagination itself painted pictures. After work, which he completed mechanically, David did not return home immediately. He made a special trip to the gym, since a change of clothes was always in the trunk. It was necessary to throw out the rage boiling inside. For an hour and a half, he threshed a pair and pulled iron, bringing himself to exhaustion. He wanted to punch the scoundrel who was interfering with his family, but instead he had to be content with a punching bag. In the evening, exhausted, he finally went home. Physical fatigue slightly drowned out the mental pain, at least for a while. At home, the same cozy scene awaited him. Emily and Luke were playing a board game on the living room carpet. Seeing his dad, the son jumped joyfully, and his wife flew up to meet him. "Hello, finally you. We really miss you." David put on a tired smile and let his son hang on his arm. Emily hugged him and kissed him on the cheek. "How are you? Why so tired?" "Yes, there's a lot of work," he muttered. "Also training. I decided to stop by the gym to clear my head." "Oh, I see. Well, come quickly. I've prepared dinner." They headed to the kitchen. David felt a wave of indignation cover him again. Here she was, fussing, rejoicing, like an ideal wife. If it weren't for the evidence found, he would now be hugging her, having dinner, and not even suspecting about his double life. The evening passed relatively calmly. David tried to be restrained and silent, citing fatigue. Emily looked at him worriedly and asked once or twice if everything was all right, if something had happened at work. He assured me that everything was fine, just an overload. At night, he slept on the edge of the bed, turning away, pretending to be fast asleep. Emily, it seemed, was also tired from the day. She pressed herself against his back and was soon snoring. David lay motionless, trying to even slow down his breathing. He was disgusted by her touch, but endured it. He couldn't give himself away ahead of time. The weekend was a real challenge. The family spent time together. On Saturday, they went to the park on the rides with Luke. The boy squealed with delight as he rode the carousel and pulled his parents by the hands to the ice cream stand. David did his best to pretend to be cheerful, although everything was boiling inside. Emily seemed to thaw at his efforts and acted as if nothing had happened. Only sometimes did he catch a thoughtful expression on her face, as if she was worried about something. She was probably worried about her secret lover, whether he was bored, whether everything was fine with him. This thought again made David grit his teeth. On Sunday, friends came to visit them, a married couple with a daughter, the same age as Luke. In front of the guests, David behaved well. Fortunately, the men's conversation about football and beer allowed him to be distracted for a couple of hours. Emily was a hospitable hostess. She laughed and joked. No one from the outside would have suspected what a storm was hiding under the mask of a happy husband. Only late in the evening, left alone, did David allow himself a little coldness. When Emily, wanting intimacy, began to kiss his neck, he gently pulled away, citing a headache. She seemed upset, but remained silent, saying good night. "It's okay, just be patient," David thought, listening to her breathing even out in her sleep. There was very little left until the appointed day. He arranged everything. He took a day off from work under the guise of an important conference in a neighboring city, explained that he would be absent on Wednesday and possibly Thursday morning. The boss didn't mind. David had a reputation as a responsible employee, and sometimes he actually went to seminars. Emily also knew about the upcoming business trip. He announced on Sunday, deliberately apologizing, that he would have to leave her with Luke in the middle of the week. The wife seemed upset, but said she could handle it and wished him luck. David saw a strange combination of relief and worry in her eyes when he mentioned leaving. Surely she immediately thought of her own thing. The opportunity to meet that type would open up. Of course, she tried not to show it, but now he knew her true feelings. Monday came, then Tuesday, which dragged on endlessly for David. It was taut like a string, but it held. Emily was still acting exemplary, as if trying to make amends for making him worry last week. God knows, sometimes David had a painful hope. What if she realizes everything, changes her mind? What if she doesn't meet with that person anymore? But as soon as she remembered her correspondence and lies, hope died. On the night from Tuesday to Wednesday, he hardly slept a wink. Every now and then I looked at the phone screen to see if anything had arrived. But no, not a single suspicious message. Apparently, they had agreed in advance and were now just waiting for an hour. Tomorrow everything will be decided, thought David, looking at the ceiling in the dark. My heart was beating loudly. For the first time in a long time, he feared the coming of morning, but he also longed for it as retribution. Wednesday was sunny and surprisingly quiet. In the morning, David got up before everyone else and made himself coffee. Today, we had to fulfill our plans. He felt feverish excitement mixed with disgust. Disgust because he had to become a spy in his own life. Excitement comes from the proximity of the outcome. Emily came out into the kitchen, sleepy, in pajama shorts and a t-shirt. David was already dressed in jeans and a shirt, as if he was really going on a trip. Nearby on the floor stood a travel bag, which he had deliberately packed halfway to look convincing. "Good morning," he tried to smile at his wife, handing her a mug of tea that he had previously brewed for her. "Oh, thank you." She accepted the mug in surprise. "You are so thoughtful today." David shrugged. "I'm leaving for a day. I thought I'd please you in the morning." Having said this, he leaned down and lightly kissed her on the cheek. Emily seemed touched. She put the tea on the table and hugged him. "I miss you already," she muttered, snuggling. David patted her on the back, feeling a lump in his throat. Once again, he was almost confused. Here she is, gentle dear. But no, he remembered too well that there was a lie behind this. Luke woke up a little later. David helped him get dressed and went downstairs with him. While Emily was busy with breakfast, he squatted down in front of his son. "Listen, champion, I'll leave today for work. I'll be back tomorrow, okay? Listen to your mom." Luke nodded seriously, but then put his arm around his father's neck. "Dad, don't leave." "I need it, honey," David said softly, hugging the boy tightly. "Don't be bored. The day will fly by without you noticing." Emily watched them, leaning against the doorframe, with a slight smile. "He can handle it." "Yes, baby." Luke let go of his dad and tried to smile cheerfully to him. After breakfast, the family went out to the car. Usually in the morning, they each went about their own business. David to work, Emily took Luke to the garden. Today, David was leaving. He threw his bag into the back seat. Emily stood on her tiptoes and straightened the collar of his shirt. "Be careful while driving, okay? And call when you get there." David nodded. Their eyes met. Emily's gaze was soulful, a little sad. She was clearly worried about the separation, or playing well. David couldn't resist and looked away, hugged his son again, and then got behind the wheel. "Bye, Daddy," Luke shouted, waving his hand. "Bye, hero," David replied and forced himself to smile. Emily waved her hand, pressing Luke to her side. David drove away from the house, trying not to look at them for too long. He drove down the street, turned the corner, and entered the highway leading out of the town. But after a kilometer, making sure that they definitely couldn't see him from the house, he pulled over to the side of the road. My heart was pounding so hard that it was pounding in my temples. "Okay, that's it," he thought. David turned off the engine and took his bag from the back seat. A black baseball cap and sunglasses peeked out from under his clothes at the very bottom, a kind of disguise so that, if necessary, he would not be immediately recognized from afar. He put on his cap and hid his eyes behind dark glasses. He looked at himself in the rearview mirror. It seemed quite normal. You never know if he was a passerby. Leaving the car on the side of the road, he got out and quickly walked back towards his block, taking a shortcut through a small park. On a weekday morning, it was deserted. David walked, automatically noting how the birds were singing, how the sun was flooding the playground, a picture of a world unaware of the impending drama. He walked around the next house and soon found himself on a street parallel to his own. Here it was possible to walk between the courtyards, exiting exactly to their house from the back. To be sure, he took out his phone and dialed Nick's number. The friend replied almost immediately. "Hi, how are you? Are you in Madison yet?" "Hello." "Not really," David answered quietly, lowering his voice even though there was no one around. Listen, Nick, I ask you one thing. If you suddenly don't have contact with me today or something, can you pick up Luke from kindergarten in the evening? I'll give you the address. It's not far from our street." There was silence on the phone. Then Nick asked seriously, "Dave, what are you up to?" "Nothing illegal, don't worry." David grinned joylessly. I don't know how it will go. I may need your help with my son." "Of course, I'll take it, no problem," the friend said quickly. "Give me the address, and please take care of yourself." "Thank you, Nick," David whispered. "You will be very helpful." After disconnecting, he sent Nikolai the address and contact information of the teacher, in case he had to call him. Of course, he hoped to pick up the child himself after everything, but you never know. Preparing for the unexpected, David walked to the back of his yard. The fence could be bypassed from the neighbor's side. They had a gate at the back. He would have climbed over the fence if necessary, but fortunately, he noticed that the gate was not locked. Apparently, Emily once forgot to close the latch. Entering his sight, he hid among the trees. It was about 9 in the morning. Surely Emily had just taken Luke to kindergarten. Then she had to go to work at her kindergarten. Her usual plan, classes from 9 to 12, then at 1 o'clock in the afternoon she brings Luke home. But today, David hid as best he could, waiting. He understood that there was no one in the house. Now it was early. The lover is unlikely to appear until she returns. Question, will she go to work today or take the day off? She didn't say anything like that in the evening, but if she's planning a meeting, she might have given herself a day off. He stayed in the yard for half an hour, occasionally walking around to stretch his numb legs. Several times I tried to go into the house, but I was afraid that she had not left yet, although the car had left, but suddenly she would return for some reason earlier. It's better to wait for the right moment. Around 9:30 am, the sound of an approaching car broke the silence. David looked out from behind a tree. Emily's familiar minivan was driving down the street, its red side sparkling. He knew every scratch on his door. The car slowed down and turned into their driveway. David ducked. Here she is, back. But why so early? It's not even 10 yet. Emily got out of the car, her purse hanging over her shoulder and a bag of groceries in her hands. She also took out a large blanket from the car, as if for a picnic. For what? The woman walked to the house and unlocked the door. David heard her go inside. His heart was beating loudly. That meant he didn't go to work. Perhaps she came up with a reason and returned home to prepare for the arrival of the guest. He was angry at how boldly and easily this was happening. The husband had left, the child was in the garden, he could spend time with his lover right at home without hiding. About an hour of tedious waiting passed. David decided not to enter right away. He had to wait for the second participant. All this time, he painfully imagined what Emily was doing inside, maybe taking a shower, putting on beautiful underwear, preparing a treat. These images made him sick, but he endured. Finally, around 10:40 am, David heard the sound of another car pulling up to their house. He looked out carefully. A dark blue sedan stopped at the curb. The driver turned off the engine and got out a middle-aged man, tall, with short brown hair. He was wearing jeans and a polo shirt. He looked around, clearly nervous, then hurried to the door. David retreated into the shadows. Finally, he saw with his own eyes who was the cause of his nightmares. The man looked familiar. David squinted. Yes, he saw it somewhere. Perhaps at one of the holidays in kindergarten or during a morning meeting when parents bring their children. Either this man took his child to Emily's group. David's face hardened. This means that the guest was confirmed, the student's father. Emily must have heard the sound of the arrival because the door opened before the guest could even knock. She literally pulled him inside, quickly scanning the street. However, who should she be afraid of, since her husband is far away? The door slammed shut. David exhaled, realizing he had been holding the breath involuntarily. That's it, they're inside together. His blood boiled with rage, but he knew not to act too soon. It would take time for them to fully expose themselves. He tried to imagine what was happening outside the walls of his house now, and this almost made him run across the yard. Surely they are hugging in the hallway, kissing. Emily is probably whispering something affectionate to him. Perhaps this man's name is on her lips right now. David exhaled shakily, trying to stop the trembling in his hands. He decided to wait 15 to 20 minutes. This should be enough for them to calm down and, probably, move to the bedroom or at least sit in the living room in a compromising state. The evidence must be obvious. The minutes passed slowly. Every sound a bird chirping, a car on a nearby street caused David to flinch. Finally, he decided it was time. David pulled out his phone and made sure the camera was ready. He turned on the video recording. The device will record everything that happens in front of him. Then quietly, trying not to attract attention, he walked to the back door. It led from the kitchen veranda, and they usually didn't lock it during the day, especially if someone was home. He pressed the handle. It didn't budge. Locked. Crap. I had to go around to the front door. This is riskier. If someone looks out the window, they will notice. But it seems that in the living room, the curtains were drawn, but on the second floor, it doesn't matter. Climbing onto the porch, he carefully inserted the key into the lock. My heart was pounding against my ribs, my breathing was quickening. He tried to turn as quietly as possible. The lock clicked. David froze. It was quiet inside, only some muffled sound was heard, like a groan. The sound made David's eyes darken with rage. He pressed on the door, and it slowly opened. There was silence in the house, broken only by barely audible noises from the second floor. David slipped inside and closed the door behind him. The faint smell of men's cologne hit his nose, not his smell, someone else's. What he felt on his wife that Wednesday. It was everywhere here, mixed with the scent of her perfume. The living room turned out to be empty, although on the sofa there was some kind of Emily's blouse and the same blanket spread out, as if someone had been sitting or lying on it. There are 2 cups of coffee on the coffee table, one almost full, the other half. Nearby is an open box of cookies. David pointed his phone camera at this evidence and slowly walked further. The sounds above had died down. Did they seem to have heard or suspected something? As he climbed the stairs, he felt his legs giving way from excitement, but his furious rage gave him strength. On the second floor landing, he noticed abandoned men's moccasins. Nearby, sticking out of the corner, was a bag that looked like a child's backpack with toys, perhaps a gift for the child or just a disguise for the arrival. The bedroom door was not fully closed. Muffled talking came from there apparently. They were also wary. David paused at the doorway, holding up his phone. It seemed he heard Emily's muffled voice. Maybe the neighbor's cat, answered a male voice. David recognized him. That's right. This man once gave a speech at a graduation party. It seems like the father of one of the children. His name, if I'm not mistaken, was Michael. Yes, damn it, Michael Jennings came to mind. Then Emily introduced, "This is the father of Joshua, my pupil." And now Michael was in his bedroom with his wife. "Darling, come to me, don't be distracted." Michael's voice was heard again, this time quieter, velvety. Emily chuckled lightly. David's blood began to roar in his ears. Unable to stand another second, he pulled the door wide open. Like if betrayal is not about you. And in order not to miss the next story, be sure to subscribe. We appreciate each of you. A picture appeared before his eyes that would remain with him forever. On the marital bed, a crumpled sheet, on it was a naked Emily, covered only by the edge of the blanket, and next to him was a man, naked to the waist, who at the same moment jumped up when he heard the slam of the door. Emily screamed shrilly, instinctively wrapping herself in the blanket, her eyes wide with horror. David held the phone with his arm outstretched, continuing to film everything that was happening. His voice, when he spoke, sounded foreign to him, low, strangled with rage. "Let's not get distracted, you say. Please continue, don't be shy." "Crap," Michael swore, rushing for his shirt, which was lying on the floor. He tried to cover himself with her, taking a step forward. "David, it's not what you think." "Shut up," David barked so that even he was surprised at the strength of his voice. The man froze. Emily sobbed, tears instantly rolling down her flushed cheeks. "God. David, You." He turned the camera directly at her. She pulled back, pressing her back against the head of the bed. "Don't you dare say a word now, understand?" She nodded, covering her mouth with her hand, sobbing. Michael tried to move closer to Emily, as if protecting, but David immediately pointed the camera at him. "And you, son of a bitch, don't move." Michael raised his hand, trying to look placating. "David, let's calm down. Put down the phone. We'll talk." David chuckled, feeling himself shaking. "Calmly? Are you kidding?" He looked at them. A wife with disheveled hair, bare shoulders sticking out from under the blanket, a barefoot man frantically holding his shirt in his hands. Apparently you had a fun day here, right? While I'm at work, while the child. Emily's face contorted at the mention of the child. Luke. Oh my God. Shut up. David growled again, this time turning purple with anger. Don't you dare say his name now. And yours too, he glanced at Michael. What, I wonder, is your child's name? Joshua, right? I know you. Came to my house to my wife while your own child was playing in her band. Michael turned pale and took a step forward, holding out his hand. Listen, this is all very complicated. Let's lower the camera and talk, please. David suddenly felt an unbearable urge to pounce and punch him in the smug face. He lowered the phone for a second, stopping filming, and covered the distance in 2 steps, landing a crushing right hand on Michael. He didn't expect it and staggered, falling sideways onto the bed. Emily screamed. No, David, don't. No need, he cried, pouncing on his defeated lover. The shirt fell to the floor. Michael raised his hands, trying to protect himself from more blows. What is not necessary? Beat this bastard. Or maybe I shouldn't have noticed earlier how you were having sex behind my back. Emily wailed tearfully, watching her husband, contorted with rage, beat Michael, but apparently she was afraid to intervene. Michael received several strong blows to the face and torso, but managed to dodge the next one, and, taking advantage of the moment, sharply pushed David away. He flew back, collided with his back on the dressing table, dropping the bottles of perfume with a clang.
Enough.
Michael shouted, wiping the blood flowing from his cut lip. Enough, calm down. I understand you're angry, but calm down. David almost laughed at the absurdity of the phrase. He picked up the phone again and pointed it at them. Get dressed, both of you, quickly. Michael glanced at Emily. She nodded, continuing to cry. He began to pull on his trousers, which were lying at the foot of the bed. Emily timidly pulled her nightgown from under the blanket, which was visible by the pillow, and began to frantically cover her nakedness. No, my dear, David noted coldly, catching her every gesture with the camera. Don't rush to hide. The camera sees everything. I think the judge will appreciate how modest you are. Emily burst into tears, wrapping herself back up and covering her face with her hands. Michael, having buttoned his trousers, turned to David with his palms outstretched. David, can I at least put on a shirt? David shrugged, continuing to film. Go ahead if you have enough shame. Michael frowned, but silently complied, throwing his shirt over his blow-scarred chest. A purple bruise was already forming on his cheekbone. There was a pause. All that could be heard was Emily's intermittent sobbing. David was breathing heavily, as if after running. He surveyed the pitiful scene, 2 lovers caught red-handed, trembling before him, and he felt a strange feeling as if this was not happening to him, but on the screen of a film. Yes, he finally said in an icy tone, this is what will happen now. You, he nodded at Michael with the camera, get the hell out of my house. If I see you here again, I will kill you, I swear to God. Michael opened his mouth to say something, but when he met David's gaze, he only nodded slowly. He bent down and picked up the shoes from the floor. I left my shoes downstairs, David muttered, on the way out, quickly. Michael hurried towards the door, limping slightly. David followed him with the phone. Emily, noticing that his attention had switched, jumped out of bed, pulled on her nightie, and rushed after him. David, please. I'll deal with you later, he told her without looking back. Now I'm seeing my guest off. They went downstairs. Michael quickly put on his shoes, staggering from the blows he received. David opened the front door for him. Goodbye, Michael. It was nice to get to know each other better, he chuckled coldly. The man stopped on the threshold and turned around. There was a mixture of shame and anger in his gaze. Look, I'm really sorry. I did something bad. But please, for her sake. David even flushed with indignation. For her sake? Do you still care about her? Now go and think about your wife, if you have one, or about your child, whom you exchanged for lust. Get lost. He pushed his lover in the chest, and he, losing his balance, flew out the door, almost rolling off the porch. David threw him his jacket, which he picked up from a hanger in the hallway. "I forgot, my friend." Without waiting for an answer, David slammed the door and clicked the lock. For several seconds, he stood with his back against the door and his eyes closed, trying to stop trembling. A fire of hatred and pain raged in my chest. It seemed that a little more, and he would scream at the top of his voice, venting his insult. But a cautious step came from above. Emily must have been unsteady as she descended. David's eyes widened. Well, now she is. He looked at the phone. Everything was recorded. The video only lasted a few minutes, but captured enough. He turned off the recording and put the phone in his pocket. Then you can do without filming. Emily stopped in the middle of the stairs. She managed to throw a robe over her nightie. Her face was white as chalk. Her mascara was running from tears. She looked pathetic, but David didn't feel sorry for her. At that moment, he felt nothing but icy rage towards her. "David," she began in a trembling voice, but was unable to continue, choking on sobs. "What?" he said sharply. "What do you want to tell me? That this is not what I think? What didn't you want? Or maybe the apology is ready." Emily sobbed. "I'm sorry. Please." She went down step by step, holding onto the railing like a drowning person. Having reached the floor, she tried to come closer, but David raised his hand, stopping him. "Don't come any further." The wife stopped, clutching the collar of her robe. "David, I don't know what to say." She muttered through her tears. "This is terrible. It's my fault. I have no forgiveness." "That's right," he nodded, looking straight at her as if she were a stranger. "There is no forgiveness for you." Emily staggered as if she had been slapped. For a moment, despair flashed in his eyes. "Please listen to me. This is all. It was a mistake." She spoke hastily. "I didn't mean you harm, I swear. It just happened. I myself don't understand what happened." She fell silent, seeing her husband's face darken. David slowly walked closer, closer. Emily tensed, as if expecting a blow, but he simply looked down at her, even though they were almost the same height. Now she seemed to have shrunk. "Several months." He repeated quietly. "So you took him to my house over and over again, slept with him in my bed, lied to my face for months." Emily covered her face with her hands. "I wasn't looking for this on purpose. It was madness. I understood everything, but I couldn't stop." "Do you love him?" David suddenly asked, and was surprised at his own question. Emily shook her head, wiping away tears. "No, no, I swear, no. It was like an infatuation, a passion, but not love. I love only you, only you." David smiled bitterly. "Don't you dare say the word love now. You killed love." "I'm sorry." She sobbed. "It's my fault. I ruined everything. But I love you. I made a terrible mistake. I'll fix everything. Just give me a chance. For Luke's sake. For our sake." At the sound of his son's name, David flushed. "Did you remember about Luke? And when you had dates here, did you think about him too? He saw your lover. Do you understand?" The child asked me about Uncle, and I, a fool, calmed him down and said that Mom wouldn't do anything bad. Emily blushed with shame. It was the only time Luke was at home. He woke up at the wrong time. After that, we didn't meet again while he was gone." "Oh, of course, how noble of you." David laughed briefly, joylessly. "What a relief only once did my child have to witness your fornication." Emily sobbed and reached out to him, apparently wanting to touch his hand or shoulder. "Honey, please, I have no excuses, but I beg you, don't destroy everything. I'm ready to do anything to get you back. This madness is over, really. I would have stopped everything with him anyway. I really didn't want to destroy my family." David pulled away as if from fire. His eyes sparkled. "Didn't want to destroy your family? Are you serious?" He raised his voice, and she recoiled. "You've already ruined everything, Emily." She destroyed it when she just allowed it to happen, and certainly when she repeated it over and over again. She shook her head, knelt directly on the floor, grabbing his hand. "Please, David, For the sake of 6 years together, for the sake of our son, give me a chance to atone. I'll do whatever you ask. I beg. It was painful and disgusting to look at her humiliatingly on her knees. David abruptly pulled his hand away from her fingers. "Don't you dare do that, get up," he said, wincing. Emily stood up unsteadily. She reached out, trying to touch his chest, but he pulled away. For a second they froze, looking into each other's eyes. An abyss of despair and regret splashed in her gaze. It contains cold hatred and pain. "That's it," David said quietly, as if pronouncing a verdict. "It's over, Emily." She trembled, shaking her head. "No, don't say that. This is not the end, we can." "The end," he repeated firmly. "I am filing for divorce." Emily sobbed quietly. "No, please." "What did you think?" David suddenly exploded, boiling. "After this, will we live as before, so that I imagine you with him every night?" "Never." Emily covered her mouth with her hand, tears flowing in streams. She began to realize that everything was really falling apart. I'll leave work, we'll move away, change the environment." She babbled, grasping at any ideas. "I won't write to him, I swear. I will prove that I love you, just—" "That's enough," he interrupted, unexpectedly calmly. He no longer had the strength to swear. Devastation overwhelmed him. "It's over, Emily. Pack the necessary things and leave." She stared at him, not believing. "Leave?" "Yes. Get out of my house." This is my house too," she stammered hesitantly, knowing full well that the situation was ridiculous. Just like that, she was immediately kicked out. David grinned. "House. After this, there's no way he's yours. But I have nowhere to." She began, and immediately realized how stupid it sounded. Of course, there are parents or acquaintances, but how to explain? "Go to your Michael," David said venomously. "Or will he kick you out too?" Emily shook her head, swallowing back tears. "No, his wife doesn't know anything. He didn't. We didn't intend to be together, it was." "I don't care," David said wearily. "Just get out." Emily, stuttering from crying, tried to approach him again, but he pulled back, seething. "Don't come near me. I am not responsible for myself, understand." She froze, covering her face with her hands. Then she asked quietly through her fingers, "What about Luke? You can't. You can't live without him. He needs his mother." David clenched his fists. "Mother? That's the kind of mother she is, a cheater. But the child loves her." He exhaled, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'll think about Luke. I'll take him with me for now. You better stay out of our sight until I decide how to explain it to him." Emily shook her head sadly. "No, don't take my son away from me. And you took away his normal family." David lost his temper again. "What were you thinking? He will feel everything. He already feels. He told me that you are with some uncle. Have you thought about how this will affect him?" Emily lowered her head. "No, don't take him away. I am everything for him." David turned away. The pain for the child tore her soul, but anger did not allow her to take pity on her. "This is not discussed now," he said over his shoulder. "Collect things that are necessary. Everything else will happen later, in my presence, when we decide." Emily stood motionless, her hands hanging limply. It seemed that she had no strength left even to cry. Only endless sadness froze on her face. "Where are you? Where should I go?" she asked hoarsely. David shrugged without turning around. "I don't care. If you want, go to a friend's place or go to a motel. Just don't mess around with this guy again under the same roof as my child, otherwise." He didn't finish, but the threat hung in the air. Finally, Emily slowly moved upstairs, her legs stiff. David remained downstairs, leaning his forehead against the wall and closing his eyes. He heard a closet door slamming upstairs and drawers being pulled out. There was a pounding in my temples as the adrenaline was leaving. When she came down with a small suitcase, he had already opened the front door. They didn't look at each other. Emily, wryly wiping her wet cheeks with the back of her hand, walked out onto the porch and stopped. "Can I say goodbye to Luke?" she asked very quietly. David clenched his teeth. He himself had to pick up the baby in a couple of hours. Not yet. He doesn't need lies now. Today, I'll pick him up from the garden myself, and I'll think of something. Emily nodded. She walked down the porch, then looked back. I love you, David. And Luke, I realized everything, but it was too late. For a moment, hope flashed in her eyes. She probably expected him to at least answer something. But David just looked at her coldly. She lowered her head and staggered towards her minivan parked in the yard. David closed the door before she even got into the car. He was left alone in an empty house. Silence pressed on my ears. He looked around the living room, the blanket, the mugs, the telltale smell of someone else's cologne. His gaze caught sight of a family photo on the wall. Him, Emily, and Luke smiling against the backdrop of the ocean last summer. Coming close to her, David tore the photo from the nail and threw it on the floor. The glass shattered with a crash, splitting happy faces into pieces. He sank heavily onto the sofa, covered his face with his hands, and for the first time in all this time burst into tears loudly, desperately, splashing out the pain that seemed to be destroying him from the inside. David didn't remember how long he sat on the sofa, bowing his head dejectedly. The tears dried up, leaving behind emptiness and dull pain. There was an eerie silence in the house. It seemed that the walls, which had recently heard the laughter of the family, were now saturated with bitterness. He woke up to the sound of an incoming call. Phone. David took it out with a trembling hand. Nick called. "Hi," David said hoarsely, raising the phone to his ear. "Dave," my friend's voice sounded tense. "Are you alive there? What's happened? You're missing. I'm worried." David tried to pull himself together. He took a deep breath. "Already. That's it, Nick. I did it. Caught her. With him." During the pause, he heard Nick curse quietly. "Crap. I don't even know what to say. How are you?" "How?" David smiled bitterly. "Destroyed. Devastated. Furious. Yes, a little bit of everything." Nick sighed on the other end. "Listen, you are not alone. I can come right away. You shouldn't be in this state alone." David wanted to refuse, but suddenly realized that he really needed his friend's presence. After the shock, awareness came, and support would not hurt. "Please come," he said quietly. "I'm already flying." "I'll be there in 10 minutes, Nick assured and hung up. David stood up heavily. He looked around, a mess of an untidy living room, a broken photo frame on the floor. The storm of emotions was gradually replaced by cold clarity. We need to move on with our lives. We need to pick up our son and take care of him. The world will not stop, no matter how much the soul hurts. He collected the shards of glass from the floor, carelessly placing them on the coffee table. Then, after hesitating a little, he took a family photo, broken by cracks. He ran his finger over the image of Emily smiling. My heart sank. He put the photograph in the chest of drawers. He didn't have the strength to throw it away yet, but he couldn't see it in front of his eyes anymore. The doorbell rang. David automatically looked into the mirror in the hallway. His eyes were swollen from tears. His face was twisted with suffering. He ran his hand over his cheek, wiping away the salt trails. "I don't care. Nick will understand." He opened the door. Nick stepped inside and immediately hugged his friend, tightly, brotherly. "Hold on, brother," was all he said. David stood silently, feeling the moisture welling up in his eyes again. But he restrained himself, taking a deep breath and exhaling. When Nick released him, he looked around. "Where is she?" he asked quietly. "Gone," David answered hoarsely. "I put her out." Nick nodded as if he should. "Right. After this." He didn't finish speaking as he walked into the living room. He looked carefully at his friend. "Are you feeling better?" "What do you mean? I didn't do anything stupid." David shook his head. "No. I wanted to kill, to be honest. But I restrained myself. I hit him a couple of times, and that was it." Nick's face darkened. "The same father of the child from the kindergarten?" "Yes," David nodded, clenching his jaw at the memory. "Michael Jennings. Now I remember. I've seen him before." Nick cursed. These are bastards. Bastard. I'd kick his ass real hard. I did, David smiled sadly. But there's no point. You can't change anything. He sank onto the sofa, wearily rubbing his face with his palms. Nick sat down next to him. What now? He asked carefully. David didn't answer right away. He had already played this question dozens of times in his head. Now, divorce, he said slowly. I can't live with her. I'll never forgive you. I understand, Nick said quietly. You have every right. But most of all, Luke, David continued, looking at the wall. How can I explain this to him? How can I prevent him from getting hurt? Nick exhaled heavily. It's difficult, of course. But children are often more adaptable than we think. The main thing is not to go into terrible details. He doesn't need to know. Yes, David nodded. I'm not going to hurt him with the truth. I'll say, I don't know, I'll come up with something. He stood up, starting to pace around the room like an animal in a cage. I need to pick him up today, in a little over an hour. As I look at him, he will ask about his mother. You can say that Mom left for a while, Nick suggested, or she got sick and is staying with her grandmother, for example, and then you'll decide what to say. David thought about it. I didn't want to lie to the child, but the truth is unacceptable now. Perhaps so, he agreed. I'll tell you, Mom left. Do you want me to go with you to get him? Asked the friend. I'll back you up in case you're not able to. David initially planned it himself, but Nick was right. After everything he had experienced, he felt weak and broken. I'll be grateful if you keep me company, he admitted. Nick patted him on the shoulder. Certainly. Let's at least drink some water or tea first. You are pale. David actually felt a dry mouth and a hollow emptiness in his stomach. He had eaten almost nothing since the morning. Thank you, tea would be nice, he muttered. Nick, as if at home, went into the kitchen and began filling the kettle. David sat down at the table, watching indifferently as his friend busied himself. You know, Nick began while the water was boiling, I was thinking, maybe I should visit this guy later, talk frankly. David shook his head. I don't see the point. I already told him everything. His voice rang with metallic notes. Let him think about his family now. He has a wife, can you imagine? Nick whistled. Yes, indeed. Maybe I should tell her. David paused. He had already thought about it. I'll probably tell you, he said slowly, not for the sake of revenge, although for her sake too, so what? But he has the right to know who he lives with. Nick put a cup of tea in front of him. Agree. There is no need for such a cretin to have both a wife and a mistress. And Emily. David clutched the mug with trembling fingers. Do you think she realized what she had done? Nick shook his head. It's hard to say. She's probably in shock right now. But don't think about her now. Think about yourself and your son. I don't think so, it's just. He paused, searching for a word. It's a pity, I guess. As a person, she's not evil, was. Nick shook his head. Even good people sometimes do terrible things. This is not an excuse. She is your wife. She was obliged to at least think about the child. David's eyes flashed with pain. This is what infuriates me most of all. What Luke was involved in. That she risked everything we had. Nick nodded understandingly. Okay, David sipped his slightly cooled tea. It's time. He stood up. Anxiety rose in his chest. How will he now pretend that everything is fine for the sake of his son? Nick seemed to read his mind. Maybe you should change your clothes, wash, and then the view. Well, you know. David looked at himself. His shirt was wrinkled. There was slightly dried blood on his hands, probably someone else's. The face is darker than a cloud. That's right, he agreed. I'll get up in a minute. He went into the bedroom. The smell of the recent nightmare still lingered here. The bed was crumpled and a torn sheet lay on the floor. David held his breath so as not to smell it. I noticed Emily's phone on the floor. Apparently, it fell out in the chaos, or she forgot. He picked it up and looked. The screen was locked. Not now. He threw the phone on the dressing table. He quickly changed his clothes. He took off his soiled shirt and put on a clean t-shirt and sweatshirt. I washed my face in the bathroom. The same suffering man appeared in the mirror, but a little fresher. Okay, that'll do. When he came down, he saw Nick already in the car in the driveway. David grabbed the keys to Emily's minivan, now his car. He decided angrily, let her drive whatever she wants. However, looking at the salon, I winced. Everything there reminded me of my wife. Luke's favorite soft toy lay in the baby's chair, and on the mirror hung a lavender-scented perfume that Emily liked. No, today we'd better go in Nick's car. He walked up to his friend's car, and he rolled down the window. Have you decided with me? Nick asked. Yes, your car is better, David nodded, opening the passenger door. 20 minutes later, they arrived at a small kindergarten building. The courtyard was full of children playing. It was just time for a walk. David noticed the small figure of Luke among the guys sculpting something out of sand in the sandbox. When he got out of the car, the boy was the first to see him and shouted joyfully, "Dad, Daddy!" Luke immediately ran across the platform towards him, waving his arms. The teacher, Emily's colleague, Miss Rachel, called out to him worriedly, but when she saw David, she nodded. She recognized him as her father. David squatted down and opened his arms. Luke rushed towards him, laughing cheerfully. "Dad, you're back. Are you not going to work anymore?" David hugged his son tightly to his chest, feeling the treacherous sting in his eyes again. "For the sake of my son, hold on. For his sake." "Hello, champion," he said hoarsely, kissing the top of the boy's head. "Yes, I decided to return early." Luke looked at him with shining eyes. "Jorge, does Mom know? She said that you are due tomorrow." David's heart gave a painful twitch. He forced a smile. "I'll call my mom. She'll find out." Then Miss Rachel came up. "Mr. Wilson, good afternoon. Emily asked for time off today, and I took Luke to my group. Are you? Is everything okay? Will she come herself?" Apparently, the teacher was surprised by her father's early appearance. David cleared his throat. "Good afternoon, Miss Rachel. Yeah, Emily. Can't pick him up today, so thank you very much." The woman, noticing the expression on his face, did not ask any more questions, only nodded understandingly. "Certainly. Luke, grab your jacket and backpack, okay?" "Fine," the boy responded. He twisted out of his father's arms and ran to the bench where his things lay. Miss Rachel, lowering her voice, asked sympathetically, "Is Emily okay? She looked upset this morning." David tensed. So she was here today. She probably took Luke and immediately left, taking a day off for her date. He didn't know what to answer. "Don't tell your colleague all the dirt. Emily, it's difficult for her now," he said carefully. "I'm sorry, I can't go into detail." "Of course, I understand." The teacher smiled softly. "If anything, let me know how I can help Luke. He's a wonderful boy." Luke had just returned, carrying his little Spider-Man backpack. David thanked Miss Rachel again and, taking his son by the hand, walked towards the car. Nick waited behind the wheel and, apparently understanding the delicacy of the moment, did not interfere. David put Luke in the back seat. The boy immediately noticed that this was not his mother's minivan. "Dad, where is our car?" "We came in Uncle Nick's car," David explained, belting his son in. Luke looked ahead and saw Nick for the first time. "Hello, Uncle Nick. Hello, young pirate." Nick smiled in the mirror. Luke chuckled contentedly. The car started moving. "Where are we going?" The boy was surprised. "Home." David turned to him. "Yes, go home." "Is Mom home already?" Luke asked immediately. Here it is, the inevitable question. David clenched his teeth. "No, Mom isn't home right now," he said slowly. "Where is she?" The son blinked his eyes. Nick met David's gaze for a moment in the mirror, saying, "Hold on." "She went to her grandmother for a few days," David said, trying to speak naturally. "She needs to help Grandma." Luke frowned. "Why didn't you take me? I also want to go to my grandmother." "You go to kindergarten, pirate," Nick interjected, "and Grandma's place would be boring." The boy thought for a moment, then turned back to his dad. "When will Mom arrive?" Soon, David lied, hoping that this vagueness would work. For now, we'll be alone with you. We'll have a men's day. How do you like it? Luke nodded a little warily. Okay, but I miss my mom. Pain pierced my chest. David smiled tightly. I know, honey. She misses you too, really. He patted his son on the head. He seemed to calm down and switched to the view from the window. Nick dropped them off at David's house. If anything happens, call me, he said goodbye, firmly shaking David's hand. Thank you, Nick, he answered quietly, for everything. When his friend's car drove away, David mustered all his will into a fist so as not to succumb to the melancholy that rolled in again. Luke was nearby. He had to hold on for his sake. They entered the house. The boy immediately noticed his mother's absence. Mom, we've arrived, he shouted out of habit. Silence. Luke looked at Dad. She really isn't. Yes, son, remember I said, she's with her grandmother, David confirmed. The boy took off his shoes and walked into the living room, looked around carefully. Why is the glass broken? He asked, noticing the remains of glass on the table. David paused. The same photo. Oh, Dad dropped it by accident. He tried to say casually, it's okay, I'll fix it later. Luke shrugged, turning his attention to the toy cars scattered by the sofa. Children can be easily distracted. Dad, will you play with me? He asked, already taking one typewriter and handing the second one to his father. David sat down on the carpet next to him. Certainly. He spent an hour racing cars on the floor with his son, building a garage out of blocks, then reading him a book about Denny the dinosaur. Luke laughed, seeming pleased that his dad was spending so much time with him. Almost as usual, only my mother wasn't around. Towards evening, the boy remembered again. Shall we call Mom? David put the book down and sighed. We can't now, son. She's probably busy with Grandma. I want to tell her good night. The son's lips trembled. David felt a lump rise in his throat. Let me write to her, he suggested peacefully, and she'll call you as soon as she's free. Luke thought for a moment and nodded. Cold. For dinner, David somehow cooked some macaroni and cheese. Luckily, it was a dish that Luke loved and was easy. The boy ate and soon began to nod off from fatigue. Such a busy day. After putting his son to bed, David sat next to him and stroked him until he fell asleep. A conversation was spinning in his head, or rather, self-incrimination. Was it worth lying to the child further or gradually preparing him for the truth? Maybe say that Mom will live separately, but still loves him. But it's too early. Let him get used to her being away from home for a while. Tiptoeing out of the nursery, David closed the door. The house greeted him with silence again. Now there was no need to pretend to be calm. He headed towards the bedroom as if into the lair of a beast that needed to be cleansed. He tore off the crumpled sheet, crumpling it. The smell, there was their smell. He gritted his teeth and threw all the bedding into a large trash bag. He won't sleep on the same sheets. I wanted to throw the mattress to hell, but that's hardly possible right now. The attack of rage arose again as soon as one remembered the picture of the detected betrayal. David lowered the bag of bedding into the garage to be taken to the landfill. I put on clean underwear from another old pack, which simply smelled of powder. Then he noticed his wife's phone on the dressing table. The display is dark, but if you press it, it will ask for a password. However, David thought she would probably soon miss it herself and realize what she had lost. Most likely he will call. And sure enough, almost as if on schedule, David's cell phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled out, Emily is calling. Apparently, by her number, since she lost hers. David chuckled. He wasn't going to speak now, but he didn't throw it away either. I let the call go to voicemail. Immediately an SMS came. Please talk to me. I don't know where my phone is. David, I beg you, at least write. He locked the screen. It's not time. I went back down to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet. Alcohol was like a magnet. It numbed the pain. He poured himself a glass and drank it in one gulp. The burning liquid burned my throat, but did not reduce my sobriety. The adrenaline was too strong. He poured more. Pictures were pulsating in my head. Here she was crying, on her knees, begging. For the sake of her son, for our sake. How could she? How could she break all her vows and betray her like that? David had no answer. He knew one thing for sure, there would be no forgiveness, and he will do everything to protect himself and his son from the consequences of her action. It was already midnight. When the whiskey began to act slightly, dulling the pain, David opened his heavy eyelids and thought about tomorrow. He needed to call work, take a day off, or a vacation. He couldn't think about projects right now. Another thing is to find a good divorce lawyer. Then he remembered, Nick's older brother is a lawyer who seems to specialize in divorce cases. Worth contacting. He scribbled a reminder on his phone, call the lawyer, call the office. Then, after hesitating, he opened the messenger and nevertheless wrote a short message to Emily. Luke is at home, everything is fine. I told him that you went to your mother. It's too early for me to call yet. I have your phone number. A minute later, the answer came almost instantly. Thank you. Can I at least hear his voice? It hurts me very much. I understand that I don't deserve it, but I beg. David stared darkly at the screen. There was no desire to fulfill the request. He typed the answer. No, not now. Rest. And he added, don't call or come without my consent yet. She didn't respond with a text, but a crying face emoji came through. David turned off the sound so as not to receive anything else that night. Having finished the rest of the whiskey, he went upstairs and collapsed on the clean bed. The smell of someone else's cologne seemed to him everywhere, but fatigue took its toll. Exhausted, he fell into a heavy, dreamless sleep. Lying on one side of the bed, he carefully avoided the other, where his wife usually slept, as if she were infected with poison. The next morning, David woke up with a heavy head. Whiskey, lack of sleep, everything took its toll. But there was a new day ahead, and action had to be taken. Luke entered the bedroom early, still in his pajamas, with a teddy bear under his arm. Dad, will Mom be back today? First of all, this is the question. David sat up on the bed and pulled his son towards him. No, my dear, not today, he answered softly. He won't be back yet. When? The boy asked, looking into his father's eyes. David felt a lump in his throat, but tried to speak confidently. After a while, I don't know for sure yet, but we can call Grandma later to find out how Mom is doing. Luke calmed down a little and nodded. Okay, will you take me to kindergarten? Yes, of course, David patted his son's disheveled hair. And I'll pick it up again in the evening. You and I are together everywhere now, right? Luke smiled at the prospect. Yeah, together. In his little world, there was no understanding yet that this together was now a new way of life. After getting ready, David took Luke to kindergarten. On the way, the son remarked, and we left my mother's car at home. David squeezed the steering wheel nervously. Yes, for now, let's go in Dad's car. On the garden site, he did not meet anyone out of place. His wife's colleague, Miss Rachel, brought Luke back into the group. She wanted to ask how things were, but noticing David's tense face, she didn't. Returning to the car, David dialed his boss's number. Suho said that he had family circumstances and needed to take an unscheduled vacation for a week. The boss, hearing his hoarse voice, did not object. There was not enough work at the moment. David then called Nick. He answered immediately. Hello? How are you? The friend asked carefully. Okay, David lied. Listen, Nick, remember what you said about your brother, a lawyer? Can you give me his contact information? Certainly. I have already written to him that you might contact me. He is ready to meet. Nick dictated the number. David thanked me. An hour later, he was already sitting in the office of a lawyer, Mike Weller, Nick's brother. Mike turned out to be a short, balding man with a tenacious gaze and a sympathetic expression on his face. David briefly outlined the situation, trying to stick to the facts. His wife cheated, there is video evidence, a small child, he wants a divorce with the maximum protection of his son's interests. Mike listened, nodding, only occasionally clarifying details. David, I'll tell you straight, the case is unpleasant, but from the point of view of the law, it's quite simple. The lawyer began, leafing through his notes. You have been married for 6 years. The child is 4 years old. Property, house with a mortgage, car, savings. As far as I understand, you want to keep the house and the child with you. Exactly, David nodded. Let her take whatever she wants the car that they bought her. But the house is mine. I arranged it before marriage, and I paid the mortgage. And most importantly, my son will be with me. There was such firmness in the voice that Mike smiled at the corner of his lips. That's understandable. Tell me, does your wife intend to challenge custody? I don't know, David darkened. Now she is depressed, asking for forgiveness. But about the child, she, of course, loves him. Maybe try. Mike thought. Look, officially, adultery in our state does not directly affect divorce, since we have no fault, no guilt. But it can play indirectly. If you prove that her behavior was harmful to the child, and you say the son was present at home when her lover visited, this is a strong argument. Plus the immoral behavior of the teacher, she works with children. David nodded, clenching his jaw. Yes, teacher. The emotions are understandable, the lawyer remarked softly. But we will operate with facts. You have evidence video correspondence. They will be needed during negotiations, perhaps informally, if a peaceful agreement can be reached. I think your wife will not want a scandal. She will be accommodating, especially after learning that you have such trump cards. And great, said David coldly. Her goodwill is not important to me. The main thing is that Luke stays with me and that. He paused. For what? Mike pushed. David lowered his eyes. So that she doesn't get anything she doesn't deserve. No money, no housing. Let her have what she had, that is, almost nothing. You can consider this my malice, but... I understand, the lawyer nodded. Your condition is natural. I will try to provide you with the most favorable terms during your divorce. Moreover, she worked part-time as a teacher. Her income is less than yours, as far as I can see. Usually this plays against the husband when dividing property, but given her guilt, I think we can reach an agreement without trial. I'm not going to pay her child support, David said harshly. Only for the child, if necessary, but since he is with me, she is not owed anything. And I won't interfere if she wants to see her son, he added after a pause, but exclusively on my terms. What are your conditions? Mike raised an eyebrow. For example, not in the near future, until everything settles down, and under supervision, not alone. I don't believe her, David explained quietly. This is a subject for a separate conversation, said the lawyer. Usually the courts leave both parents the right to communicate if there is no threat to the child. But given your son's age, you will most likely get primary custody, and she will be given a visitation schedule. You can stipulate that at first it will be with you, then, if everything is fine, then separately. David winced but remained silent. He remembered Luke's eyes in the morning. The boy misses his mother, and no matter what she does, for him she is his beloved mother. For the sake of the child, we will probably have to allow communication. But not now, at least let time pass. Okay, he agreed reluctantly. Shall we get started then? Yes. I will prepare the necessary papers. You need to notify your spouse of the intention to divorce and schedule a meeting to resolve the issues. Let's try to do without a full-fledged trial. It's faster and cheaper. I'm sure she won't want to sue either. David remembered Emily's downcast eyes as he kicked her out of the house. Yes, she's unlikely to dare to make a scandal. She's too weak right now. I think so, he said. She will sign everything that is needed. Well, Mike stood up, extending his hand. Hang in there, David. You are doing the right thing, and I will try to do everything quickly and reliably. David thanked the lawyer and left the office with a slightly lighter heart. At least the plan was outlined. He felt that he would do anything to get Emily out of his life legally and forever. As he got into the car, he thought about his next step. There was one unfinished business churning inside him, telling the truth to Michael Jennings' wife. David knew that that woman was not to blame for anything. She was the same deceived husband, and not telling her would mean becoming an accomplice to the cover-up. It wasn't difficult to find her. David called Nicole, Nick's wife, who also knew some of the kindergarten parents, and carefully found out the name of Michael's wife. It turned out that it was Laura Jennings, and she also periodically brought her son Joshua, although more often it was her husband who did it. Nicole had her phone number left for parent chat. David asked for this number. Around noon, he sat in his parked car, bracing himself for the difficult call. Finally, I dialed it. Horns. A female voice answered, a little surprised. "Hello? Who is this?" "Laura Jennings," David asked, clearing his throat. "Yes, it's me. Who am I talking to?" "My name is David Wilson. You don't know me, but I think we should talk. This concerns your husband, Michael." There was a tense silence on the line. "What's wrong with Michael? Is he—" His voice tensed. "Is he in the hospital? What's happened?" "He's not in the hospital," David hurried to assure her. "But something happened. There was a situation that you need to know about. It's hard for me to talk about it." "Please speak directly. You're scaring me," the woman said warily. David gathered his will. "Your husband is cheating on you, Laura, with my wife." He decided to cut cleanly. Better a terrible ending than endless horror. Loud breathing was heard in the speaker, then almost in a whisper. "What?" "Yesterday I found them together," David continued, already eager to speak. "I have evidence. I'm sorry to tell you this, but you need to know the truth." Laura was silent. David even wondered if she had passed out. But then I heard muffled crying. Are you sure?" she finally croaked. "Maybe some kind of misunderstanding. Who is your wife?" "Emily Wilson, your son's teacher," he replied. Laura sobbed. "Emily, oh God." Apparently, the puzzle was coming together. David continued. "Yes, they met while we didn't know anything. My son accidentally let it slip to me. I figured it out. Yesterday, I found them at home. I have videotaped them being in my bedroom." God, God, Laura repeated. She no longer hid her sobs. "How could he? I'm really sorry," David said sincerely. He really sympathized with this woman. Her world was also collapsing now. "I thought you should know. I'm filing for divorce myself." Laura calmed down a little, as much as possible. "Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Although this is terrible to hear, I saw, of course, that he had become distant in recent months, but I would never have thought, and with my son's teacher." Her voice filled with anger through her tears. "If you need my testimony or evidence, I have correspondence and video," David offered. "Yes, if possible, send me." She faltered. "Although, Lord, I don't know if I want to see this, but probably I should. It's up to you to decide. I can send it if you want to make sure or use it in a divorce," he said. "Okay, send it," she said tiredly. "To this number, via SMS or mail. I'll send it to you by email," David suggested. "SMs may not be of the best quality." He got her email address. "And, forgive me for asking," he added, "do you have children besides Joshua?" "No, only him," Laura answered. "So much the better," David blurted out, meaning that there were fewer victims in this story. "Yeah," she agreed bitterly, understanding the subtext. "Thank you for being braver than my husband and telling me the truth." There was bitterness in her tone. David realized that her shock was being replaced by anger, and rightly so. "We are both victims of their deception," he said quietly. "Hang in there, Laura. If anything happens, I'm in touch." "Yes, and you hold on too," she answered. "This is all very painful." They said goodbye. David exhaled, leaning back in his seat. He suddenly felt better, a feeling that he had done the right thing. After all, sooner or later Laura would have guessed anyway. His wife would have found out, but otherwise, immediately and for sure. He had no doubt that hell had begun for Michael, and so it happened. A few days later, mutual friends heard that Laura had kicked her husband out of the house and filed for divorce. Another family was destroyed by their betrayal, and in this David saw gloomy but logical justice. Then the phone beeped, receiving a new message. From Emily. David clenched his teeth, revealing the message. David, I was fired. The principal called today. Someone reported about us. I'm no longer a teacher. I'm so ashamed. I just wanted you to know. I'm so sorry. David read it and couldn't help but chuckle with satisfaction. Here's the next comeuppance. It looks like Laura Jennings didn't hesitate. Surely her first reaction was to call the kindergarten and scold her. How else did the director find out so quickly? Maybe there were rumors. He understood. She was reaping the fruits of her actions. His hatred cooled down a little, giving way to cold satisfaction. Justice had triumphed. Emily lost everything she had, and that's what she needs. David ignored the message. However, the information was useful. Without a job, Emily would have no income. She had some savings, but small ones. Financially, she was in trouble. A couple of hours later, he met Nick and Nicole for lunch. He talked about visiting a lawyer. His friends fully supported his decision. Nicole said that among the kindergarten mothers, there are already rumors about a terrible incident. With a teacher, Emily, they say that she slept with one of the parents and was fired. David asked not to go into details and not to say that he was the husband of the same one, but Nicole diplomatically replied that many had already guessed. It was a little annoying, but it couldn't get any worse. No one expressed open condemnation of David. Everyone sympathized with him as a deceived spouse and, most importantly, worried about the children who were involved. It was even rumored that Emily would never be allowed to work with children again. The stigma would remain. Yes, she will have nothing to cover it with. David understood that she was reaping the fruits of her actions. His hatred cooled down a little, giving way to cold satisfaction. Justice had triumphed. Emily lost everything she had, and that's what she needs. 2 weeks have passed. During this time, David and Emily, through lawyers, prepared a divorce agreement. Emily did not resist a single point. She agreed to leave the house to her husband, take only her car and personal belongings, and did not claim custody. She didn't even show up to sign the papers in person. Everything was done through her lawyer. At that time, she lived with her parents in another city. The father and mother sheltered their daughter, although they did not hide their disappointment with her action. Their disappointment was understandable. They always considered David an exemplary husband, but they adored Luke and were now worried about his fate. Emily almost never went out. She was ashamed to show herself in front of people. David assumed that she was so broken that she lacked the will to fight, or feels too guilty to demand anything. All this time, Luke asked about his mother every day. David stuck to the theory that his mother was still with her grandmother, healing her nerves. He was surprised. What are nerves? I had to laugh it off. Secretly, David knew that he couldn't wait too long. The child had to see his mother, otherwise he would start to worry more. Emily wrote to him several times, each time begging him to allow her to see her son, at least for a short time, at least somehow. For the first few days, David refused, saying that it was too early. The boy had only just calmed down. But at night, listening to how Luke sometimes called his mother in his sleep, he understood. You cannot be cruel to the baby because of your resentment. At the end of the 3rd week after the breakup, they agreed. On Sunday afternoon, Emily would come to see Luke in the city park. She was prohibited from approaching the house. David did not want this yet, and they decided to communicate on neutral territory. He promised himself to be correct, but cold for his son. Nothing extra, just let the child be with his mother. When the appointed day arrived, Luke was overjoyed to learn that he would see his mother. He jumped and clapped his hands all morning for breakfast. David smiled forcedly. The child did not understand the whole background. For him, it was just a wish fulfilled. The afternoon in the park was sunny but cool. David and Luke arrived a little early and waited on a bench near the playground. The boy turned his head, looking for his mother's car. Emily appeared almost unnoticed. She approached from the alley on foot. She was wearing a simple gray coat and her hair was down. She looked thin and pale. Luke was the first to notice her and started to run. "Mommy, Luke!" Emily opened her arms. The boy crashed into her, hanging on her neck. Emily sobbed, hugging him, kissing his cheeks, stroking his head. "My dear, how I missed you." David slowly walked closer, giving them a minute. He stood a couple of meters away, watching Luke, happy, babble something to his mother, and Emily, choking on tears, smiling at him. My heart sank with conflicting feelings. In this picture, she seemed like such a loving mother. If you didn't know that betrayal was hidden inside her, you could have been moved. Emily looked up at her husband. The smile immediately faded. There was anxiety and pain in the eyes. "Hello," she said quietly. "Hi," David responded evenly. They were silent. Luke looked at them and happily suggested, "Let's go to the site. I want to show my mom how high I can climb a hill." "Come on, of course." Emily squeezed out a new smile for her son. The three of them walked towards the playground. David stayed a little further away. Emily gave all her attention to Luke. She lifted him onto the climbing frame, caught him at the exit of the slide, clapped her hands at his every achievement. The boy was beaming with happiness. David sat down on a bench to the side, letting them be alone, but not taking his eyes off. He felt superfluous, but understood that this was necessary for now. After about 40 minutes of active games, Luke got a little tired and ran to his father. "Dad, do we have cookies? I want to eat." David took out a snack he had stored in advance, a banana and crackers. Emily followed, straightening a stray strand of hair. She pulled out a handkerchief and tried to discreetly blot her sore eyes. "Thank you for bringing him," she said quietly to David, while Luke enthusiastically devoured the cookies. "For his sake," he answered just as quietly, looking at his son. Emily nodded, lowering her head. Then she spoke again, not looking at her husband. I have almost nothing to say. Just thank you and sorry again." David didn't answer, pursing his lips. Emily looked at him pleadingly. "Can I continue to see Luke? Please." "I agree to any rules." "The court will decide that," David said dryly. Emily's face drooped. "Yes, I understand." Luke pulled his mother's sleeve. "Mom, are you coming home with us? Can I?" Emily flushed and looked helplessly at her husband. David squatted down in front of his son. "Luke, remember what I said. Mom is still living with her grandmother. She still needs to return there." The boy's face immediately became sad. "But why? I want Mom to go home." David felt his heart clench. He affectionately placed his hands on his son's shoulders. "I know, baby, but this is what is needed now. It's hard to explain. When you grow up a little, we'll talk. In the meantime, Mom loves you, you can see. And I love it. We just live separately." Luke pouted stubbornly. "Did you have a fight? Don't you love each other now?" The moment came that David was afraid to think about, but it seems that the child already guessed. He glanced sideways at Emily. She covered her face with her hands. David took her hands away from her face gently, so that Luke would not worry even more, and said quietly, "Luke, Mom and I, we still love you more than anything in the world. But each other well, it happens that adults stop being husband and wife. It's hard to understand, but the main thing is, we will always be your dad and mom, we just live separately." These were bitter words, but David said them as calmly as possible. Luke blinked several times, processing what he had heard. Then he asked, "Is this forever?" "Forever," David answered, barely audible. The boy frowned, then suddenly rushed to hug his mother. "Mommy, I don't want forever. I'll miss you." Emily sobbed silently, stroking her son. David stood up, clenching his fists. He had to intervene before the scene degenerated into a child's tantrum. "Luke, listen." He drew the boy to him, hugged both of them at once, his son and his wife. "It's necessary. But we will both still be with you. Just take turns." "Do you promise?" the boy asked, clinging to his father. "You won't leave me." "No one would even think about you, baby," David whispered, kissing his son. Emily nuzzled the boy's head. "You hear me, Luke? We will never leave you. You are our treasure." The three of them stood together in this strange, sad embrace. David looked over his son's head at the tree in front of him, his eyes sparkling. Emily caught the child's every breath, as if she was afraid to let go. Finally, Luke suddenly asked, looking at his parents, "Are you friends now?" David was slightly taken aback by this question. Emily also looked up at her husband in surprise. David answered after a pause, "We, I will try to be friends, for your sake." Emily nodded gratefully in agreement. Luke seemed satisfied with this and, wiping his wet nose with his sleeve, asked, "Then let's go on the swing again, huh?" "Let's go, of course," Emily smiled weakly, wiping away her tears. They spent the rest of the meeting more peacefully. They pushed the child on a swing and took turns telling him funny stories. David was polite but distant in his conversations with Emily. She didn't try too hard. When it was time to say goodbye, Luke was sad again, but Emily assured that they would see each other soon. David decided, let him think soon for now, but we'll see. The boy kissed his mother several times, waved, and got into the car with his father. Emily remained standing by the side of the road. David glanced at her briefly before driving off. She was broken, but tried to hold on for the sake of the child. The meeting was not easy for her. He understood there were still many such difficult moments ahead. But deep down, David felt that he had done the right thing by not prohibiting her from communicating with her son. No matter how much he hated her for cheating, she would remain Luke's mother. The car drove off, and Emily disappeared from sight. Luke was silent, looking out the window apparently. He was digesting. David was also silent. "Dad," the son broke the silence when they almost arrived at the house. "Are you sure you won't make peace with your mother?" David gripped the steering wheel. The question couldn't be more direct. "No, son, I won't make peace," he answered quietly. Luke sighed. "It's a pity. You were good." David's throat tightened. "They were," he whispered. "But we love you, that's the main thing." Luke nodded sadly. That evening, after putting his son to bed, David opened his laptop and began looking through old photographs. Here is their wedding. Young, happy, he and Emily cut the cake. Here's a trip to the Grand Canyon in the second year of marriage. Here is the birth of Luke. He is holding his tiny son, next to a tired but radiant Emily. A lump rolled up in my throat, but there were no tears, they were cried out. This was their story, beautiful and fragile, and it was over. Only fragments of memory remain. David collected the albums and put them in a distant drawer. Maybe someday later, years later, he will be able to remember without pain, or maybe not. But life went on. The morning will definitely bring light. David closed his eyes. For the first time in a long time, a quiet confidence settled in his soul. A new chapter of life awaited him and Luke. The wounds might not heal immediately, but he believed that he and his son would cope and be happy again. Dawn will rise soon.